Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Massive Big Ten matchup. Penn State heading on the road to play USC. And Dill, you look at this Penn State team, it's not been super flashy on the scoreboard. You take a look at the film of those games, like they've dominated those football games. And then you look at USC, this feels like a must-win game for USC, right? Really disappointing loss against Minnesota. Dill, there are certain aspects of this USC team that I absolutely love, but there are some massive flaws within this team as well, specifically on the offensive line. And that's got to be the first matchup that you're looking for in this football game. You look at Penn State, one of the best pass rushes that you see in the country, really good at creating negative plays, both in the run and passing game. You look at USC, really some big question marks at the offensive tackle position on both sides, as well as the interior. Going to take a look at this matchup, talk about some key players. Now, before we get into it, as always, let it fly in the comment section. Best part about doing these are hearing from you guys, whether you agree with the boys, whether you disagree. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start with this Penn State offense going up against the USC defense that, it's clear that this USC defense is better than it was last year. How much better is it? I think we're going to find out against the Penn State offense that Coach Koldnicki has changed his Penn State offense around, right? You take a look at the numbers, 34.5 points per game. That's 24th in the country. The number that I have circled, though, is 7.2 yards per play in the top 10. What is the one thing we always talked about with Penn State's offense? Yeah, it could be efficient, but it really lacked explosiveness. I mean, Coach K has come in and really ignited that, both in the rushing attack and the passing attack. Now, I think the biggest storyline is, can USC stop this Penn State rushing attack? You look at the numbers. Penn State runs the football a ton, right? 63% of offensive plays, they're running the football. That's 12th in the country, averaging 5.5 yards per carry. That's top 20. How do you see this Penn State rushing attack stacking up against the USC front seven that till Eric Gentry, I'm really hoping, is back for this football game?
Yeah, and what's really encouraged me about Penn State is they've kind of been explosive throughout this season, but I feel like their offense against Illinois and then obviously against UCLA, their offensive line played the way I was
Yes,
expecting. I
agreed.
feel like they had a bit of a slow start, not like brutal, but I was like, you think Penn State, I mean, they've had some really good offensive lines. I feel like their lack of production on offense has kind of shrouded that fact, if you will. But this was an offensive line, frankly, that against Illinois and against UCLA played physically the way I expect them to. They like to run that gap scheme kind of system. They were moving guys off the ball. They were kind of setting the floor at like that 4 to 5 yards. That's kind of when Penn State does that, and you combine that with some of the plays they're able to draw up off of play action, especially with Tyler Warren, I think they can be really
Well,
dangerous.
you start with the rushing attack. Like, if you block up for Nick Singleton, you get him to the same. You could say the same thing for Tatron Allen, like both really explosive running backs. When you get these backs to the second level, like, they are so good at making people miss and hitting those explosive plays. And that's one thing that I thought USC really struggled with against Minnesota. Like, offensive linemen for Minnesota seemed to be getting clean to linebackers. Linebackers weren't only just not fitting the run, but they weren't really getting off blocks. And this is something that Penn State does really well, like working doubles, working up to the linebackers, something USC struggled with. I think it's something that Penn State does very well.
And
You're
the
look,
worry about USC is they're just a little thin. I mean, Gavin Mayer and
yeah,
Clifton have played really good football. Kobe Pepe has come in and given good snaps too, but I just don't feel like you have that built out rotation yet for
yeah.
USC where, again, you got a team like Penn State that's going to want to kind of slam it on you for like the whole game pretty much and then work stuff off of it. That's where I get a little concerned because Minnesota was able to commit to that in a way and get first downs, keep the chains moving. You could see USC wear out a little bit on that front seven. I think Penn State, I mean, probably a better version, frankly, of that. So USC is going to need to find a way to make some negative plays at the end of the day.
That's where it comes in. Like, you got to get this Penn State team behind the chains. Like, Coach Koldnicki's so comfortable operating in like 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2 when the playbook's wide open. And the USC wasn't able to get Minnesota behind the chains, and therefore you're right. Like, Minnesota just kind of grinded USC down. You could tell in the 4th quarter, like, Minnesota, and you saw this against Michigan too, quite frankly. USC a little thin on the defensive line. It definitely got to them. Now, you look at this USC defense still, a couple of things that I want to see cleaned up. One, you said it best, like, Eric Gentry's been the guy that has created those negative plays. That's going to be massive for USC. And whether Eric Gentry's healthy or not, Mason Cobb, Easton Mascarenas-Arnold, some of the guys on the defensive line. How can you get Penn State behind the chains? Because if you can, like there are times where Drew has looked, I wouldn't say bad, but looked uncomfortable. I think most of those times most of that is because they're kind of in some of those obvious passing situations.
Well, because if they can't really give real play action, that's where I feel like you've seen things
Yeah.
where,
Yep.
like, again, linebackers don't get sucked up as much because he's done a really good job working the seams. I mean, a couple
Yeah.
really nice throws to Liam Clifford, like those are big time throws, but that stuff doesn't work as well. The stuff to Tyler Warren, it all doesn't work as well when they can't work off of play action. And when they just need, you're kind of right, when they just need to make things happen purely from the pass game, that's where you've seen Drew Alar make some errant throws that you're like, oh, I wish he wouldn't miss those. But when he's been in rhythm, when they've had the play action game working, I feel like he's been really, really good, taking a big step in my opinion.
Yeah, and they're also really good attacking that deeper third. They don't do it often. They don't throw the football often. But when they do throw, they want to be explosive. Like Drew's average depth of targets 10.2 yards down the field. They're completing 66% of his footballs 20 plus yards down the field. That's an exceptional number. You're seeing Drew take that step. And I think for Penn State fans, that's really exciting. Not to like say this USC defense is like a one-man defense, but I think Eric Gentry, again, massive, not only in terms of creating negative plays, but also taking away that middle of the field, especially some of those seam routes. That's where Penn State wants to do their work. And when you have a guy with the size and length that Eric Gentry has, dropping back in zone coverage, taking away some of those seam routes, that could be a really big storyline as well. It's going to be an interesting matchup. Now, you flip sides here, Dill. There's no secret what the biggest storyline is, right? Like USC fans are frustrated with this offense, and I think a lot of that frustration comes from you just don't have the guys right now at the offensive line, specifically the tackle position, to keep Miller Moss upright. Miller Moss, I think Miller Moss has been great when he's been kept clean, but he hasn't been kept clean that often, especially when you go up against some of the better pass rushing units in the Big Ten, right? Michigan, it certainly was a problem, was a little bit of a problem against Minnesota. It's going to be a problem against Penn State if they don't do anything to handle it, because you look at Danny Dennis Sutton, Abdul Carter, even on the inside with guys like Zane Durant, they can get
They
after.
have so many situations where like basically all four of them win and they win immediately.
Yeah.
And you're right, that's been a huge problem. Again, the guards, center guards have played okay. Alani Noah's had his moments of struggling, if you will, for
Yes.
USC. But really, at the end of the day, it's the tackles. And you
Yeah.
look, I mean, they have two legitimate first round players. They probably have a top five, possibly in Abdul Carter. And frankly, I think Danny Dennis Sutton might end up close to the top 10. So that's where I think you look at UCLA and how they kind of mitigated that, especially in the first half. USC's got to look something like that, where the ball was never
Yep.
staying in the hand. I thought Martin did a really good job. I was a little surprised to see Penn State go to that much zone coverage. I mean, they're a
Yeah.
team that likes to go man. They had a lot of holes in that zone, I felt like, in the first couple drives. Then when they went to man, they started to put the kibosh on that a little bit. I'm really interested to see kind of that matchup where, again, you don't necessarily want to leave yourself in man coverage a ton, I feel like, against USC, just because their weapons are so good. But also, if you're Penn State, I think you can rely on getting home quickly and kind of
Yeah.
limiting their
If
ability.
you're Lincoln Riley coming into this game, I said for against Minnesota, like run the football, and USC was running the football very well. They've run the football well all season, right? They're not doing it very often, but when they decide to run the football, they're averaging 5.2 yards per carry. Now they're running the football only 39% of the time, which is 126 in the country. But when they want to run it, they've had success. This is a Penn State front seven that's very hard to run the football on, only giving up 2.5 yards per carry. That's number 6 in the country.
But
Dill,
you can sometimes get them moving a little bit. You saw like they're really, really aggressive. If you can create creases, and I thought
yeah,
UCLA, again, things they did kind of getting them out to the perimeter and then getting cut back lanes, those type of things, just given how aggressive Penn State likes to be. Sometimes you can get some of that stuff, but I guess my issue is what's USC's identity going to be in this game, and what's kind of going to be their baseline and what they can just go to? Because again, you got to see UCLA have some things work, but it just wasn't consistent. I wonder if like what's USC's plan going to
I think it's two things really. This is my humble opinion. Lincoln Riley's a hell of a lot smarter than me in terms of designing and calling an offense. One, if you want to push the ball down the field, you have to do something to help your tackles, right? Whether it's a tight end chipping, whether it's a running back staying in pass pro, that has to be addressed. Like you just can't go empty set and let these guys pin their ears back. And I think secondly, Dill, I don't know how much you're going drop back, pushing the ball down the field. Like I would love USC to do that. I think they have the weapons and quarterback to do so, but they don't have the offensive line that can hold up in pass protection to let the ball go down the field like that. I think the quick game is going to be massive. USC, Zachariah Branch has had a tough season. I get it, right? He might need to be huge in this football game because I think USC is going to go to a lot of quick stuff, try to get their guys in space, and then try to operate after the catch. Zachariah Branch, that's his bread and butter. That's his wheelhouse. I feel like if he's going to have a coming out party, I think it needs to be against this team. And I think secondly, Mekhi Lemon, he's another guy that is really jittery with the football in his hands. You have some dudes that I think can create after the catch. And because I don't think USC is going to be comfortable sitting in the pocket and pushing the ball down the field, because I don't think the offensive line can hold up in pass pro, like you said, UCLA did a really good job of this. Work the quick game. Try to get Miller Moss in a rhythm. Try to get Zachariah Branch in a rhythm. Like I know the USC fans are out on Zachariah Branch right now. And quite frankly, I can't blame them. He has struggled to start the season. We all know what this kid can do. If you can get him his confidence back, going back to what he was early true freshman year, he can be a difference maker for this USC team.
And at the end of the day, they need to be able to use Penn State's aggression against them. That's really their only shot.
Yeah, yes.
Like they like to play downhill. That's everybody. That's safeties, that's linebackers, that's defensive linemen. Everything's attacking really at the quarterback and at the line of scrimmage. Again, can you get Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon, those guys in positions, whether it's on a screen, whether it's on various like underneath routes? I mean, that is the issue is I feel like you kind of have a one-dimensional plan of attack, if you will. And again, I wonder if the run game can work against Penn State. They're certainly consistently really good. You can maybe sometimes find the crease and hit a big play on them, like what Michigan's done in the past, like what Ohio State's done in the past. But I don't see a USC, unless their offensive line plays at a different level, just consistently running it on them. So aside from the quick game, that to me is the fundamental question. What is their answer going to be off of that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And as much as I think even I at times, and I'm sure USC fans want to get at Lincoln Riley, man, it's so hard to call an offense when you just don't trust your offensive tackles. Let's get into the pick here, Dill. Very wild from the ESPN analytics department. Penn State or USC favored in this football game. Now Vegas disagrees. Penn State 4.5-point favorites on the road. Dill, long travel. Like this is going to be a travel game. The first one I think Penn State's experienced in terms of going across the country. What do you got in this game here?
I got Penn State. I just think there's such a narrow bound of how USC can move the football. I think, again, like Penn State's offense, I think will get theirs. I don't know that they'll score a zillion points. I'm just so, like, again, when your tackles are playing the way they're playing, you kind of saw it. I think you can look something like what Michigan had to do last year, and I'm just not sure USC has the offensive line to run the ball that much and make it work. I just don't see how they get the ball down the field. That keeps their big-time weapons out of the game a little bit in guys like Jacoby Lane and Deuce Robinson. I think that's really hard for USC to overcome that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Penn State and 4.5 points as well. Look, the USC fans know, like, I am – and I'm still high. Like this USC team is good. There are a lot of aspects of this team that I like, but this is such a tough matchup, especially with this pass. It might be the best pass rush that we see in the country. I love that this game is at USC because one of the things that I've noticed about USC is that I think they're struggling with the snap count on the road. Like they struggled with it against Michigan. They struggled with it against Minnesota, like tackles just not getting off the football. So if you were playing this game in Happy Valley, I'd be really concerned. Maybe it gets a little bit better when you're at home at USC.
Think Nittany Nation travels okay or what?
It's really, really hard, especially after seeing how Penn State's looked the last 2 weeks and then what USC has looked like specifically in that Minnesota game. Give me Penn State in the points here. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. USC fans, let us have it. If you
I will say it feels a little like a bit of a trap, no? Because I would have thought this would be like 10 points, frankly. On this
I think there's a lot to like about this USC team.
I don't like when we both get on the same side. That feels
100%. That normally does not work out well for the boys. We'll see in this football game. It's going to be a really fun one. I'm this one's been circled for me for a really long time. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.